Hello, my name is Emily, and I'm here today with nationally recognized authority and trust clause litigation, Dan Dalton. How are you doing today, Dan?
Emily, it's a great day here in Detroit. We had a wonderful draft and beautiful weather outside, so it's good to be home.
Excellent. So, Dan, the United Methodist Church just hosted their long-awaited general conference. Can you give us an overview of the legal issues that local churches should consider arising out of the decisions made at the general conference?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there were so many decisions that were made and so many changes to the discipline. It's going to take a little while to sift through them all. But let me talk about the legal issues that have arisen. And we're not going to talk about any theological issues. We're lawyers. We're not theologians. So we're going to stay away from that. But there's really two categories, I think, of legal issues for local churches to think about arising from the 2024 General Conference. The first is disaffiliation. As you know, by now, it's May 14th, 2024, that the General Conference voted not to extend a pathway out for local churches under 2559. That was the temporary pathway out that was voted on at the 2019 General Conference. So that door is closed. We knew that was going to happen. We knew we have been talking about this for years, actually, that you really needed to hop on that and get out in 2023 if you could, and take advantage of that because that window was going to close. It wasn't going to reopen again. We knew that the separation protocol would not pass, and of course it didn't pass. Just weeks after that was signed, the institutionalists were telling folks within the organization that they would never allow the disaffiliation to continue moving forward or the separation protocol to pass. So I know we took a lot of hits from all three sides, from progressives for calling out something they didn't think existed, and centrists who didn't believe us, and traditionalists who were telling people that we were wrong, and they were at the table and they knew. I again, we just get information and we verify that information. So we knew, since the separation protocol would never pass, we told people about it. A lot of churches uh, took their own initiative and investigated, and they found it wasn't going to pass either. So there was no surprise there to us that disaffiliation ended. So what does that mean for the local church? Well, you're kind of stuck now, unless you're in a couple conferences or you have favorable state law. There are four conferences right now that have issued statements indicating that they will let out local churches. So South Carolina, for example, has said that they'll utilize Section 2549(3)(b) of the discipline to allow churches to leave. And basically, they'll use the same formula for payment that was under 2559 for churches under 2549(3)(b), which is the church closure provision of the discipline. You have other conferences like the Holston Conference and the Illinois Great River Conference that said that we will come up with pathways out for local churches. You've also had conferences like Alabama, West Florida, prior to General Conference, said they will have a pathway out, but since General Conference had said there will be no pathway out. And it makes sense. You think about it, you have about a third of all the churches have closed since 2019, either through disaffiliation or church closures or whatever. But a third of churches in the United States have closed, which is a significant amount, most of which are the larger churches that provided the apportionments that supported the annual conferences and the general conferences. So financially, the denomination is just shrinking, or really in some places collapsing. And so there's no incentive to allow a church to leave. And what they need is either the church to stay or to take their property if they decide to go. Those who stay, we call them the remainders, are people who really didn't want to fight. They're the ones that they might be more sympathetic on one theology or the other. But quite frankly, they're people who don't want to fight. This is their church. They've always gone to the church. They'll let the church die with them. After this generation passes away, the church will probably close. So we'll see that, I think, happening moving forward. So You have some pathways out in some conferences, other conferences, there's no pathway out. So you have to use a legal means, which is looking at the state law, wherever state you're in, to see if there's a pathway out for you. We've talked in the past in other videos about Texas, for example, where Texas is very favorable law for local churches that would invalidate the trust clause. So Texas would be a good one if you wanted to challenge that and you wanted out. And there's other states as well that you can look to, and we can help you evaluate that as well. So there are options that are available on disaffiliation, but that's like the number one legal issue you got to think about is where do we go in the future with this whole thing? The second legal issue is employment, and this is going to be a big issue. So the theology has changed in the Methodist Church, and the Book of Discipline is providing different mechanisms now for churches that would accept pastors who are in same-sex marriages or want to perform same-sex or perform same-sex marriages as well. And if the local church opposes that, in some states, in some areas, they're going to find themselves in a difficult position. There is the doctrine of ecclesiastical abstention, which there a lot of churches, if they're sued for declining a pastor, for example, that they don't agree with, and the pastor sues them, ecclesiastical abstention will protect those local churches from that lawsuit. So, like in the Fourth Circuit, there was a case just last 2 weeks ago where a high school was sued where it fired a teacher that was in a same-sex relationship. And that teacher sued for discrimination. And the Fourth Circuit said, because of ecclesiastical abstention, the claim can't go forward. You can see, though, through the case law and the cases, that's not going to be the same all throughout the United States. And so I wouldn't count on that as something to move forward for churches to protect themselves from lawsuits in the future. So they're going to be able to be very discerning in figuring out how do they move forward if they're assigned a pastor that they don't agree with theologically, but they want to keep the church and they want to keep the church in the denomination, or they don't want to lose the property because they're in a state whose state laws don't really protect them. So those are things to kind of think through. This is brand new information that has come out, but it's something I think that local churches need to really kind of think through and evaluate how they're going to protect themselves from lawsuits on the employment side in the future, and also think of if they're going to leave, how they can move forward to get out of the denomination themselves. Those are really the two main issues we see coming out from a legal perspective. There's a couple of other things that we should talk about as well. One is that when you're thinking through these issues, that you need to think through where's the church in this whole process? Because in the last 5 years, it's been a lot of people who have come and gone within congregations. So really kind of take the current temperature of the church to figure out, do they want to stay or if they want to leave the denomination? So think through those issues moving forward. If you do want to leave, then work with somebody that can help you. Work with lawyers that are familiar with this area. We've had a lot of churches that have gotten legal advice from pastors, and I'm sure they're well-intentioned, but those churches are still in the denomination and they're furious with their pastor or the pastor that gave them advice. We have a lot of churches that have relied on pastors who were lawyers at one time, and I'm sure they were fine lawyers at one time. But again, you have to be in this practice area. I wouldn't do a divorce, for example, because I don't do divorce work. You want to talk to somebody that's in the trenches day to day, and there's a group of us that do this work and get that, and we want to give you the advice to protect yourself. So please, at a minimum, if you're going to move forward, speak with somebody that has knowledge and authority on these particular issues to move forward. And then the third issue to kind of think through is where do we go afterwards? You can join another denomination and you can be independent. There's nothing that requires you to join a denomination. You can be independent for a while and see how things go, or you can just join a denomination wherever you want, but don't be pushed into the notion that you have to join a denomination. Everything that you need as a church can be achieved in the marketplace, whether it's new pastors or Sunday school materials or pensions. You can get all those things individually. So think through these things as a church what is best for this local church, and how do we move forward to the next generation to stay afloat? So, with all of that said, lots of issues were decided at the General Conference. Lots of theological ground was broken. Lots of the denomination has certainly shifted in terms of its official theology. It's kind of the same place it's always been, but now it's official. So we'll see how that works. But if you're thinking about legal issues to consider in the future, consider your property issues and consider your employment issues, and just work with somebody that is in this practice area to help you out and guide you through those matters.
As always, thank you for your insight, Dan. If your church is interested in setting up a consultation with Dan, please reach out to our office at 313-859-6000 or email us today. Thank you.